Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining another Stryd webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about predicting the finishing time of your next race with Stryd. So we have a lot of great, fantastic topics to talk about today. We're going to be talking about why it is important to know your expected finishing time, the advantage of using Stryd data to make that prediction, and then 3 great tools to make the prediction with Stryd, including demo of the race calculations table, demo of the race power calculator, and demo of the superpower calculator. And plus, we're going to be answering the question, how fast can I run? Because I have certain race goals. I want to know how I should adjust my training, what I should expect for my race this fall. So I'm going to be using my data to do demos of all 3 of these features and really apply it to a real-life scenario. So first, why it is important to know your finishing time. So I grabbed this quote from a study, and I think this is one of the largest scale studies on race pacing, and I thought the quote was very impactful. And it says, "We present an analysis of 1.7 million recreational runners, focusing on pacing at the start and end of the marathon. These findings help to quantify the costs of uneven pacing at the start and end of a marathon and may help to improve coaching and performance in endurance races. The data supports the idea that even pacing leads to the best overall finishing times." So, of course, as Stryd users or prospective Stryd users, you're thinking about pacing. You know that Stryd is one of the best tools to help maintain an even pace throughout the start to finish your race in training. And this is also backed up by large-scale studies showing that even pacing is the best way to improve your overall finishing time. It's one of the lowest cost ways. It doesn't require any fitness improvements. It's really more of a skill, and with the proper tools and guidance, you can pace your race better, and it's a highly effective way to perform your best and feel better at the end of your races. So the second reason it's important to know your expected finishing time is that it helps tailor your training. And here's a quote that we've covered before in past webinars from Coach Ben Rosario, now the executive director of NAZ Elite. And he says, "If all we ever did was tempo runs, we would have done just as well." And of course, Ben, he was a coach of elite runners, and tempo runs was a very useful tool in their arsenal to improve running performance. And of course, for amateur runners, maybe tempo runs, are just used towards the end of a training cycle, but still they're a highly effective tool. And in order to best pace your tempo runs, best set up the intensities you want to be running at, you need to know your race times, because tempo runs, that's going to be based on your race times. And if you know how fast you'll be racing, then you can execute those tempo runs with higher precision. So this is just a great quote that shows that if you know your finishing times, you can better set your training intensities. If you can better set your training intensities, you can execute more effective training and improve your performance with simpler workouts. And here's another quote that talks about the importance of knowing your race times. This is from professional runner Sarah Hall. "It's amazing how the same pace in practice can feel so much harder than on race day. Stay confident, trust the process." So once again, this speaks to the importance of knowing and practicing at the intensities you expect to run at on race day, because if you can practice that and get used to that in training, it's going to feel so much easier on race day. Once you've gone through that process before, those exact intensities you want to run at, you're going to be confident, you're going to be able to trust the process and run those faster times when it comes to the big day. And finally, and this is really important in the last few years, what happens when you don't have a chance to race? A race is canceled. There's external factors that prevent a race from happening. How are you going to monitor your progress? How do you know your training's paying off? How do you know if you're progressing towards your ultimate time goals, your ultimate race goals? And that's the importance of a tool like Stryd, in that you can monitor your progress, know how your training's turning into expected finishing times, and monitor your progress with really high precision, even if you don't have the chance to race. So next, let's cover the advantages of using Stryd to make your race time prediction. So first is accounting for the race course. So that's one of the beauties of running power. We know that running power, over the course of a race, you can only output so many watts, but based on the race course, that watt's going to turn into different times, different paces. 400 watts on an uphill, it's going to be a lot slower than 400 watts on a downhill. And when you use a tool like Stryd and you know the exact intensity you can maintain, you can plug and play race courses to see how that intensity translates into pace over a variety of race courses. Next is accounting for the weather. Power can also be adjusted for environmental conditions such as temperature and humidity and even elevation. So, for example, as the weather gets hotter or the weather gets cooler and it becomes more favorable, you can see your power target adjusts in those conditions and know how that weather conditions are going to impact your expected finishing time. And finally, power is highly personalized to your abilities. So, here's a image of the power duration curve showing the power output you can maintain over a wide variety of durations. And this really describes your skill set as a runner. So if you're more skilled at the shorter distance races, but that ability doesn't translate into longer races, that could be accounted for in race predictions. So you have a really accurate idea of your abilities over a wide variety of durations and a wide variety of race distances. So for any race you sign up for, you know what to expect. So we've just talked about the importance of using Stryd and the importance of knowing your race finishing time. Now, how do you actually predict that using Stryd data? And there's three really fantastic and simple, powerful tools you can use. The first one is the Superpower Calculator, which is a spreadsheet-based application you can use on Google Sheets. The second is Race Calculations Table, which is accessible in the Stryd mobile app. And the third is the Race Power Calculator. So I'm going to be giving demos of all three of these now, and we're going to be applying it to a real-life scenario, and that's answering the question, can I, Angus, run a hour-and-a-half marathon? Can I finish a half marathon in faster than 90 minutes? So let's take a look. Let's see if I can do that. And first, we're going to look at my race calculations table results, and we can see my race calculations from 1 mile all the way up to marathon. And immediately we can see the answer to that question is no, I cannot run a half marathon in faster than 90 minutes. My race calculations table says 134 and possibly as fast as the 132 range if I use that plus minus an hour and 1 minute and 53 seconds. So immediately I know that right now, my fitness is not good enough to achieve this goal. But I do know if I do want to run my best half marathon, I can see here in the race calculations table, I need to aim for 376 watts, and that, I'm actually pretty close to my goal. So let's see what went into this calculation and, how I can, reach my goal. So the race calculations criteria is based on that power duration curve I showed earlier. And in order to fill that power duration curve in with the most accurate data, this is the type of run data you need to have in your profile. So I've broken into three categories here into necessary data, data that's most likely needed, and then data that's nice to have. So this first category is absolutely critical data that you must have, and that is you should complete either a 5K, 10K, or 20-minute max effort. And this data is really critical for establishing your critical power. And critical power is helps you establish your training zones. It lets you know how fast you should be running, easy runs, long runs, threshold runs, all the different types of runs you want to be doing for a balanced training plan. The critical power is going to help inform that. And it's also the basis of the race calculations. You definitely need an accurate critical power for any race predictions or race calculations you're going to be doing. So on top of that, data that's most likely needed that you probably don't have in your profile, but you might have in your profile is 3-minute and 10-minute max efforts. So, once you establish that 5K or 10K or 20-minute max effort, that's a really important data point in your power duration curve. But you definitely want to add to that and add a few more critical data points in there. And that's 3-minute and 10-minute max efforts. So this can be completed in a single session. You can grab a manual critical power test from our workout library and add that to your calendar. And you can really knock this out in just a single session in as quick as 30 minutes, completing a max effort 3-minute and 10-minute run. And typically, I would recommend for most runners, in my experience looking at data, is to do that 3-minute run and then the 10-minute max effort run. That's going to lead to more differentiation between the two efforts. And that adds a few more, critical points in your power duration curve to help us predict your performance across a variety of durations and distances. And then next year, I have the 10-second uphill sprint. So this adds a fourth, pretty important, not as critical as the other points, but it adds a really nice point to your power duration curve in that really super short duration effort, short duration range. And I recommend doing a 10-second uphill sprint because as endurance runners, we might not be the fastest, in a 100-meter race, for example, but we are capable of producing, really high power if we run uphill and exerting that force by getting that strong push up from the start of the hill to the finish of the hill. And you're probably going to be able to output more wattage doing an uphill sprint rather than just a flat 100 meters on a track, for example. And if you have those 4 runs in your power duration curve, and you only have to have this within the last 90 days, if you meet these last 4 efforts within the last 90-day period, you're probably going to have a pretty accurate race calculations criteria. And this can be done over the course of, for example, 2 weeks if you grab our Stryd testing plan from the Stryd mobile app. But if you don't want to do the testing plan and you just want to add these, you want to sprinkle these efforts into your training, that's possible as well. And then the third thing that's nice to have, these things don't make the biggest difference to your race calculations, but they definitely help improve the accuracy, help improve and help us understand your ability to turn power into speed. And that is a shorter race simulation effort. So for example, that would be if I'm training for a half marathon, I might go do 2 miles at my race power. And I might do that on conditions I expect to see on race day. So if I'm going to have a very flat half marathon race, I would go do this race simulation on a very flat course. Or if I'm going to have a very hilly half marathon race, I would run that 2 miles on, for example, a more hilly section of road or a trail. So you want to do a race simulation effort because this helps us determine how you turn power into speed. And then a final one is running at your critical power. So once you've established an accurate critical power using the activities, by completing the activities above, it'd be great to do that, run at that critical power for at least a short duration, maybe, a few minutes, 2 to 3 minutes during an interval workout. And if you have if you meet all these criteria, you're going to have a very accurate race calculations table. So you can be confident that everything from 1 mile to a marathon is going to be just as accurate and just as applicable to your current fitness conditions. So the tip here is, look at the power duration curve and make sure it has a variety of max efforts. If it's very flat, if the power duration curve is very flat from, all 10 seconds to an hour, that means the power duration curve is not providing us much useful information. That means we can't provide you useful information. But if it's if it has a variety of efforts and has a nice slope to it across a wide variety of durations, that improves our insight into your capabilities and it leads to more insightful predictions. So the advantage of using the race calculations table to determine your finishing time is it's very simple. You can see all your race predictions in a simple view. You get power, target, and time predictions, and you just need to run. If you run, you get an accurate table, no steps or configuration needed, and it's available for all Stryd users in the Stryd mobile app. So now we're moving on to the race power calculator, and still my goal is to try and break 1 hour and 30 minutes in the half marathon. And let's see if the race power calculator can help me do that or give me some information that will help me achieve my goal here. And what I've done here is I've input more favorable conditions into the race power calculator. I made the weather a lot cooler. I went from 67 degrees, which is my current training conditions, down to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm training here at altitude in Boulder, Colorado, and I put the racing conditions at sea level, and I've done a perfectly flat course. And actually, now I can run a half marathon faster than 90 minutes. I can break the 1.5-hour barrier there. So this is fantastic news for me. You can see my finishing time. My expected finishing time is 1 hour and 28 minutes. My power target is 400 watts. But one alarming thing here is it has me running at 100% of critical power. And for any Stryd users out there who have done race predictions before, you know that's probably not possible. Typically, half marathons are running closer to 94, 95% of critical power. So the reason for the huge jump in critical power, percentage of critical power here, is that I'm running at sea level. So I'm getting about a 5% boost from running at sea level. And going back to my point earlier on training for a fast half marathon, train on using your race calculations to train for a race, um, even though the conditions are more favorable and I can run faster at sea level, I'm probably not going to be able to maintain 100% of critical power for an hour and 30 minutes, simply because my muscles, my legs are going to wear out. So this is what I mean when tailoring your training based on the race predictions. So if I know if I'm going to be going down to sea level and racing, I definitely need to prepare myself to be running at higher percentages of critical power, which is closer to my 10K intensity, making sure my body can handle that. Metabolically, I can probably handle that because I have access to more oxygen, but muscle-wise, endurance-wise, I might not be able to handle that. So if I do go run in more favorable conditions, I know I need to tailor my training for those conditions so I can actually maintain 100% of critical power for a half marathon duration at sea level. But if I put in, the more challenging conditions at altitude, you can see my time once again is closer to an hour and 34 minutes. My power targets come down. I put back in, my typical, weather conditions that I've been running in, 67 degrees. And you can see once again, it's down to a more reasonable percentage of critical power and, a more accurate representation of what I can race in my current conditions. So, answering the question once again, can I run an hour and a half half marathon? Based on the race, based on my data, actually I can, but I probably need to alter my training a little if I try and do that at sea level. So one of the great tips here, you can use the race power calculators, understand the best and worst case scenarios. So let's understand, best case half marathon at sea level, I can run an hour and 28 at 400 watts, but probably closer to a more realistic case. I'm going to have to tune that power target down because I don't think I'm going to have enough time to really, amp up my training enough to be able to maintain that 400 watts over the course of a half marathon. I'm probably gonna have to dial that power target a bit back. So a more realistic finishing time is an hour and 30 minutes and 48 seconds. I'm not breaking an hour and a half, but I'm getting pretty close. So it's really critical to understand the best and worst case scenarios for a race so you can plan accordingly and have realistic expectations. So the advantages of using the race power calculator is you can upload a race course, you can tweak for heat and humidity, and you can plan for best and worst case scenarios with ease. And this is available via the Stryd membership. It's available on Power Center and the Stryd mobile app via the event planner. So if you have the Stryd membership, definitely check it out. It's taking that race calculations table to the next level and giving you really access to the best features of Stryd. So finally here's the most advanced option, and it is the Superpower Calculator. So Superpower Calculator is a spreadsheet-based program here, and we can see I have a screenshot of all the great features of the Superpower Calculator. You can generate race power scenarios, you can calculate race power targets, you can calculate your critical power based on different max effort runs. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of these topics because it would take too long. And actually, there's already fantastic resources on the Superpower Calculator. So if you want really in-depth demo videos, go to Coach Palladino's YouTube channel. And there's 37 videos covering the Superpower Calculator. You can type in the link below, or we're also going to put that in the description of this video to check out that playlist of videos. But I am going to be doing a demo on one of the features of the Superpower Calculator, and that is the tab that says, given my current critical power, what % critical power improvement do I need to break a certain time goal? So once again, we're going to go back to my scenario of what do I need to do to break an hour and a half in the half marathon here. So let's jump into the superpower calculator. So the first thing you're going to want to do here once you get on the superpower calculator is grab the right tab, and you can find that here in this dropdown. So I'm going to be using this option. What percent critical power improvement do I need to break my time goal here? And then I'm going to be prompted to do some inputs here. So, a really helpful color guide here is in the top right, required fields, optional fields, and result fields. Of course, we'll be modifying the result and optional fields, and the result fields we won't be inputting. So just running through all the inputs I have here. The first thing I did was just input my name. So I know this is my data and not a sheet I made for someone else. I'm going to input my Stryd weight setting, which is 200 pounds. I'm going to go to my Stryd profile and grab my critical power value, which is 400 watts. And then time to exhaustion. So time to exhaustion does have a default field. If you put in if you just erase the time to exhaustion, it's going to be a default of 3,000 seconds, and 3,000 seconds to minutes is 50 minutes. This might be accurate to you, it might not be. So what you can do here is to determine your time to exhaustion. This is the maximum time you can maintain critical power. It says if you don't know, you can leave it blank. But actually, we can figure this out using the Stryd profile. So if you jump into your Stryd profile and go to the power duration curve, my critical power is 399. I just rounded up to 400. So I can go to the power duration curve and figure my time to exhaustion is approximately 37 minutes here. So I can make this a little more accurate, just put in 37 minutes to get a more accurate time to exhaustion. And then here's another field called ultra distances / times. And this is described as if you're trying to do an ultra race, you want to set this value to yes. But if you're just doing a standard race distance from like 1 mile to a marathon, you want to set this to no. So I'm going to put that to no here. So that's the basic data for all calculations. I filled that in. Now I'm going to move on to additional inputs. So here for additional inputs, so you can input a regal exponent if you know it. If you don't have a regal exponent or you don't know what that is, I put in lookup regal. And instead, I'm going to use a prior race time and race distance. So recently, I raced 10K in 43 minutes. So I inputted 43 minutes here, and I selected the 10K race distance here. And that's going to help the superpower calculator estimate that regal exponent. And now I'm going to input my target time. So I want to run an hour and a half for a half marathon. Great. I have that in. And then finally, running effectiveness. So you want to enter the running effectiveness to use for the target race. And this is a measure of how well you convert power to speed. So in this case, I actually did not know my current running effectiveness, and I had estimated. So we're actually going to use the superpower calculator to estimate running effectiveness. And this is pretty easy. So what we can do here is click on this drop down again. And what we're going to do is tap on calculate power metrics for up to 10 activities. So once I selected this, I need to go over to this activities tab. And what you want to do is input some recent race results. So I inputted a 5K time trial and 10K race. So all I had to input was the power, my time, and the distance. And then I can scroll over here and see my running effectiveness. And for races, this should probably be a pretty consistent value here. So, and I did have a consistent value, which is good. It's right around 0.9, in this case, 0.895 and 0.899. So I can go back here. I have my running effectiveness now. I'm going to go back to my tab, given my current critical power, what percent improvement do I need? And I can input a running effectiveness value of 0.899. Fantastic. So now I've filled in all the required inputs, and now I can go down to my results, which are in these green. And I can see in order to achieve my goal, achieve my goal of an hour and a half, it's going to require roughly a 5 to 6% improvement in critical power, which is about expected. A 5 to 6 improvement on the goal time of 1:34 would put me under an hour and a half as well. So, just based on the race calculations data from earlier. So we can see that I'm going to have to improve my critical power by roughly 5 to 6%, and that'll get me pretty close to an hour and a half marathon at altitude. So once again, that's just one of the use cases of the superpower calculator. And actually, as you fill in more information, everything else becomes easier to use in this sheet. So I've already input a lot of critical details, such as I've determined my running effectiveness. I've determined, I put in things such as timed exhaustion and critical power. And once you have that, it becomes really easy to use some of these other features because they operate on the same data. So I definitely recommend to check it out if you have curiosity about your data and you want to become more advanced. And it gets easier over time as you fill in more and more data and you get more and more comfortable with the sheet. And of course, as I talked about earlier, if you want in-depth demos on this, check out these YouTube videos, which are absolutely fantastic. So just to sum up the superpower calculator, it enables you to experiment and understand your data in depth. You can configure more advanced variables such as running effectiveness, regal exponents, and reserve work capacity. It can be used by all Stryders, and it's free via Google Sheets. And once again, you can access that by going to powerpacing.run/superpower-calculator. And our theme for this month is predicting your finishing times. And we have a fantastic set of workout of the week covering distances all the way from 5K to marathon. These are great ways to execute a workout in kind of the sharpening phase leading up to race day, building that confidence in your predictions, knowing that you can maintain the powers and the speed you need in order to reach your goal time. So if you have a race coming up, definitely drop one of these workouts into your calendar. And these workouts don't go away at the end of the month, so they're just going to be put into a different collection. So if you have a race coming up this fall and you want to use one of these workouts, you can add it to kind of that final sharpening phase of your training plan. And yeah, once again, this will help you really build in confidence in your race target ahead of race day. And like we talked about with the superpower calculator, upgrade to the Stryd membership and experience the best of Stryd. If you want access to that if you want access to that race power calculator, that's available as part of the Stryd membership. You can go to stryd.com/power center, go to settings, upgrade, and then immediately check out the race power calculator based on your existing data. The next gen Stryd is available if you want more responsive power values, more responsive power output, sprint modes, track mode, trail mode, next gen hardware. You can purchase the next gen Stryd at stryd.com/store. Finally, the source. I think this was a really interesting article, a really interesting study where I pulled that initial quote from, talking about the large-scale data analysis of the importance of pacing. So I definitely recommend to check this out if you are curious on that type of thing. It was a really in-depth and fascinating article on analysis of 1.7 million runners. And finally, ask your questions in the chat. I know we have some questions already. I'm super excited to answer some of these questions and hope that my answers can help you predict your finishing time with more accuracy. So we have a question from James Benjamin. I would really like to try even pacing for my marathon. Can I show average watts per lap on my Garmin watch? So you can. In this case, you'd be looking at lap power. Lap power is the metric you'd want. If you're using the Stryd Zones data field, you can put lap power and display it alongside real-time power. I would place the Stryd Zones data field in a full screen configuration and then modify the settings of the Stryd Zones data field so you can see both real-time and lap power. And this is really useful. You set up auto laps in your watch. You get lap by lap alerts when you have the auto laps on, And then you can make sure that you're not just maintaining the real-time power output, but your average power for that lap is right where you want it to be. And when you deploy this strategy, it's really easy to pace your marathon with precision and evenness. The next question is, what factors determine the predicted time that Stryd predicts? So let me jump back to one of the previous slides here. So that's primarily based on your power duration curve, and your power duration curve determines practically all the race calculations. And in order to fill that in, you want to complete these runs. So if you meet the criteria for an accurate race calculation with your running data, then you're going to have a very highly accurate result from the race calculation table and the race power calculator. All right, we're going to continue on with more questions here. We have a few more. We have a question that says, Stryd predicts that I run 5K in 1849. Last Saturday, I ran a 5K at the recommended power, but finished at 1951. The recommended power seems accurate, but the time was then off. Why was that? So yeah, that's a great question. And typically in this case, there's some disconnect between the power to pace conversion, and that can be thrown off, for example, by not running enough at your, not having any run data at that race power, or not having any data at your critical power. It could be thrown off by a weight setting. So if you want to create a conversation with our support team, we can take a look at your data and determine the exact reason for why this is. So just go to stryd.com and then just start a conversation by tapping on the blue widget in the bottom right-hand corner. And we can take a look at your profile and help figure this out. But yeah, most likely it's due to a weight setting issue, or just a lack of data at race intensity. We have a question that asks, I'm not a Stryd membership subscriber, but can I access workout of the week? So the structured workout for the workout of the week, it is available only as part of the Stryd membership. But if you do want to learn more about the workout, understand the structure, you can always go to the Discover tab in the Stryd mobile app and tap on the Workout of the Week tab, and that'll give you an overview of the workout. So you might not necessarily have all the exact durations and intensities, but you'll have a pretty good idea of the workout, and you'll be able to execute that just by running at the approximate power targets. But if you want full access to that and make it super easy, I definitely recommend the Stryd membership. We have a question from Kevin that says, what am I missing if the race calculation table doesn't show predictions for me? I have done the various tests. So in that case, I recommend heading over to support. There might be an issue in your profile, which is rare, but we can take a look and determine that exact reason and give you the information you need to have values in the race calculations table. So once again, you can just go to stryd.com and tap on that blue widget and create a conversation with our support team. So that covers all the questions we've had. Thanks so much for joining. I hope that this was super valuable information. I hope that this is giving you access to some, the resources you need in order to predict your finishing time and have your best race this summer or fall. And, once again, my goal is to break an hour and a half in the half marathon. I hope to continue this journey on. I'm going to be racing in October. So I hope to share some more insight with you all on my journey and my goal, and I hope it ultimately empowers you and gives you the information and knowledge you need to achieve your own goals. So